Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to those listening to the replay. For those that don't know me, my name is Paul Branch, and it is my honour to be the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technology Officer here at World Commerce and Contracting. So I'd like to welcome you first off to our workshop number 2, Emerging Technologies, a 101 workshop. Wherever you are in your journey, whatever level of experience you have within the emerging world of technology, this is a great place to be. I'm delighted to have a co-host on this session today, Art Raguet from Altria. Now, Art is co-founder and executive VP at Altria, and he and I have participated in sessions like this over several years now, so we're actually quite good at it, I think you're going to find. But you know, we'll see how it goes. So my experience as a practitioner in commercial and contract management spans about 30 years, particularly in the IT services industry. And as I say now, it's my honor to be part of the World Commerce and Contracting community. So enough about me. Art, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Well, thanks, Paul. And yes, as you said, we've done this more than a few times over the last couple of years. I'm the co-founder and executive vice president for Altria, and we are a contract analytics and contract management company from a software development and licensing perspective. But really, I think our partnership and relationship with the IACCM, now the World Commerce and Contracting Organization, has really helped us become better practitioners with our partner clients. So we're very excited to be part of today's session.
Excellent.
I guess with that, let me start off with just sort of an overview of today's agenda. And as Paul mentioned as we started, this is part 1 of 2. So this will be a 2-day workshop. We'll have a second session 2 days from now, regardless of whether you are here or on replay, I guess. Let's start off with just sort of an overview of the basics. As Paul said, where you are on this particular journey is going to determine what your next steps may be. I know that sounds very obvious, very straightforward, but it's good to have a well-based understanding of what are emerging technologies, and what might be emerging technologies for you could be de rigueur for somebody else. So let's sort of set a baseline of understanding on what technologies are out there and are available, and then see how that sort of blends into the digital transformation journey that your contract operations or your legal operations team is about to embark on, or may have embarked on already. It's always good to assess as you go and make minor or major course adjustments as you need to. Then we'll go deeper into those emerging technologies and really look at some real world examples of seeing those in action and how are they driving value. We'll end today's session with a survey to help each of you sort of look at the ROI of deploying emerging technologies. And we will take both your input as a group, aggregate, anonymous, of course, but also merge that with the group from the APAC and Asia and ANZ teams that we'll be talking to later today, and have a sort of a combined result when we meet again on day 2.
So Art, I think as we go through this, we're really keen to hear feedback and questions from the folks on the call today. So to do that, we're going to use the chat feature of the Zoom technology that we're using. And to get to that, there's a chat button, like a little call out loop with chat underneath. And you simply just send that out, and you can either send the chat directly to one of us, or you can send that to everyone, and we'll all see it. And what I'll do is I'll interrupt, if that's okay, and just ask the questions as they come up.
Oh, no, of course. And thanks very much for reminding everyone about the housekeeping. My bad.
No worries at all. Thank you, Art.
No, thank you. So the circle of contracts, it's sort of interesting when we think about the contract life cycle, or how contracts are initiated, how they move through an organization. And everyone looks at this maybe a little bit differently. So we thought we'd take as holistic a view as we could and incorporate those things that we've seen sort of across the market over the years. Whether you are starting at the intake or the request, moving through authoring, the redlining process, these are all parts of the process of getting a contract initiated, created, developed, internally approved, externally negotiated, electronically signed, or even occasionally still wet signature, and then managing post-execution for compliance, for performance, to ensure that obligations are met and that entitlements are received. And then either the deconstruction of the relationship, the closure, or the renewal, and the cycle begins again. There are different kinds of technologies that are in play. Yes, you may say it'd be great to have a single homogeneous kind of large solution, but, well, it may not fit for everyone. So it's good sometimes to take a more fine-grained view, a little bit more detail in terms of what kind of technologies are in play. And these may all be part of a common CLM or a common contract analytics environment, but it's a matter of which ones do you need to bring forward? Which ones benefit you the most? For those of you who are listening to the innovation session prior, there's this great concept of sort of doing your own assessment. Well, you need to do that assessment within the overall framework of the available options. You can certainly look at what my sort of, as is case may be and where's my to be, but it really helps if you can, put some structure around that. So identifying some of those other technologies, whether it's our intake portals for the request or contract automation with workflow management for self-service generation of net new contracts. These things are closer than they appear. So, if you look at that, the mirror on your car, these are imminent, available, and deployed today. Being able to extract metadata information from contracts that might have been signed earlier or third-party paper and being able to incorporate that natively within your process is, for some people, emerging technology. For other organizations, this has been running for 18 months, 2 years. So just to sort of step us through this overall cycle, and at its core, contract analytics and contract lifecycle management, we see things like intake request portals, right? It's a great use of RPA. Managing templates or clauses if you've made the move towards clause library playbook. Being able to have a place for common storage in a document repository. Supporting document generation, the automation of contracts, leveraging internal workflow and approval and collaboration, both pre sort of release to the other part and then during the negotiations themselves. Of course, the signature ceremony, what many people think of as the big act, and then managing that contract over time. That's where we look at the monetization of value, the realization of all the hard work that all the negotiation went into, and being able to track the behavior of the other party against that particular contract. At the core of many of these technologies, so sort of coming back inside the circle, are true emerging technologies. I like to tell people that it takes a lot of work to make very advanced technology easy to use. It's probably one of the hardest things out there when it comes to not just technology development as a company that develops and licenses, but also for our customers. It takes a lot to adopt some of this technology. There's a leap of faith that says, well, how well will this software learn my business? How can AI help? Does it make sense to automate this particular process? Will there be some immediate pushback against the change? And to some degree, the answer there is always maybe. Yeah, there'll be some pushback. But is the change pain worth the increased value? Yeah, I think absolutely so. To that end, we'll try to define in a little bit more detail what people mean by robotic process automation and show you some examples. What is artificial intelligence in the broad sense, and why is it different than robotic process automation? Well, one automates what works, the other one thinks about what could work, okay? And then how is machine learning part and parcel of AI? And are there other aspects of AI that you may want to start tracking or pay attention to? Last but not least, the blockchain buzzword is still bubbling around, and there's some great uses for practical blockchain today in financial services. And we're seeing some great emerging use cases for contract technology and the exchange and authenticity of document signers.
So here's a question for you.
Please.
Quite often we see, maybe a few years ago, one sort of solution would try and provide all of these things together. Certainly our research has shown now that in reality there are elements of a CLM tool that can be best done within the CLM tool, but then that tool itself needs to be integrated into the enterprise corporate enterprise stack to enable that sharing of information between corporate systems. Is that engagement the sort of thing that you're seeing as well?
We're seeing very similar, and I think the levels of integration depend on what part of the contract life cycle you're looking at. As an example, and we'll show some practical use. For RPA for intake, getting a contract process started, rather than having a dedicated external portal, which can be very useful, don't get me wrong, but in the day in the life, you want your salespeople to be able to make a contract request right from their CRM, whether it's Salesforce or Dynamics, or even something homegrown. If I'm in the financial services market, I may have a credit or derivative application that I want to be able to immediately link to the CLM. The users of these end user applications, no different than if they were supply chain professionals in their sourcing platform or their procure to pay platforms, they really don't need to know that they're leveraging the power of the CLM and that they're even one step removed from the power of AI. You want them to continue in many ways with their sort of heads down approach to getting their job done. There are other users, maybe if I think about folks who are negotiating more complex agreements, where visibility into how the AI engines have determined optimal path might be very insightful to help them think about their own questions a little bit differently, perhaps arriving at better, if not different, answers. And then I think when we look at the other side of things, post-contract signing is when we're looking at obligation and entitlement collaboration between finance and operational platforms and the core contract platform. That's certainly something that we're seeing today, but in a relatively small percentage of our customers, because that does require a certain, I don't want to sound condescending, but it's a level of sophistication or maturity in the process where the value add of this automation, whether it's just straight CLM or CLM with an embedded AI, has already proven its worth. And then the investment in IT integration to make this a corporate systems pillar, like you would have a CRM or an ERP or your procure to pay. Now we're starting to see that, for many, at least larger organizations, the CLM is becoming, that extra leg for both stability, but of course for risk mitigation and, crisis handling, which I think we've all become a little bit more aware of in the last 6 months.
And it's the development of those open APIs that enable the CLM products to be integrated in a way that doesn't cost a fortune, right?
I'm not going to try to tout our horn too badly, but when we released and published our APIs, our integration windows were dramatically constricted. All good.
So just before we move off that, Ollie asked a question.
Oh, yes.
Could we use the monitoring of news, e.g. crisis news on disasters or riots, to be embedded into a CLM dashboard, particularly if you have a high dependency on a particular geography or on a particular segment, thinking particularly around COVID perhaps, around the world, so that you could see in near real-time impacts on your business continuity planning?
I think that's a great use of AI in very broad strokes, and using that as part of your risk modeling and your risk factors to be able to extend beyond contract risk in its truest sense, but to look at the contract party risk, or even the vertical industry, or the kinds of, let's say, direct materials that might come into effect.
Mhm.
Earlier today, we heard about, I think it was ConocoPhillips talking about the demand reduction. Okay, yes, that's something that, when you see it, it's coming, it's going to have, a waterfall effect across the organization. But if I can get in front of supply chain disruptions for having finished goods delivered from anywhere in the world, how does that help me adjust, modify, or react to improve my supply chain agility? It's absolutely there, and I think it's absolutely required. So whether it's simply mining the news or maybe looking at other trends, things that might be somewhat harder for a human to understand, that is a great use of AI technology.
Yeah,
Look for
totally.
these 3 or 4 indices and these kinds of trends. This is a predicator that 80% of the time you're going to have a supply chain fail, in the next 90 days. Time to do something different. That's a great question.
Mm.
So in many ways, if I'm thinking about what kind of AI does that, in broad sense, that's a level of using some machine learning with maybe some reinforcers, some guided, and we'll get into some of that meat in a minute or two, to be able to create that predictive model by a citizen scientist rather than a data scientist. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all love really smart people. I mean, it's, I got a company filled with them, but they're working to make sure that the average contract management professional, the commerce relationship management professional, can effectively teach or allow the AI engine to learn from that individual. And that's key. It's the ultimate ease of use to have someone watch what you do. Think about all the bad habits we give our kids because they've watched us as they grew up. You want to be able to do the same thing with your software.
Sure.
So just to maybe level set, and I know we've got folks at different levels of contract management acuity. Contract lifecycle management, CLM, is just that. RPA, robotic process automation. This is really using a machine, using a program to replicate what a human might do. This is simply automating routine tasks. This is a great way to take intake requests without having to do too much fuss, let's say intake portals, and being able to do that at a higher volume in a more repeatable way. Artificial intelligence, at its core, is simply a broad term for software, programs, algorithms that can act on information without having seen it before. That's probably the simplest description that I've heard, because RPA is when you know what's coming. AI is when you don't. And there are different ways to implement AI, and we'll get into some meat. And part of that really is machine learning, enabling the training, if you will, of your software without being explicitly programmed by a developer. So it's really software that learns and improves from experience, either its own, if you send it off to go find things, or by watching your behavior, or by you providing positive and negative reinforcements to the way the software works. It sounds complex, but it's a lot easier when you see it in practice. And that gets us into this whole next level. If we were chatting a year ago, we probably never would have gone into deep learning or semantic analysis or unsupervised versus supervised learning. But these are really the things that enable AI to be a reality for every business today. And specifically AI in a very specific domain, which is interpretation of contracts. So deep learning is where you allow the software or the engine, if I take a more sort of abstract view of things, to do a very deep analysis and to interpret information on its own, to infer the relationship of things by, let's say, letting it crawl across your contract repository. Now, natural language processing is very straightforward, right? This is simply the branch of AI that deals with the understanding of human language, written or spoken. We think of Alexa in spoken, but then written language is just as important to be able to understand the intent of what someone is writing. Semantic analysis goes a little bit farther and takes this interpretation of text and is looking for a deeper level of understanding and interpretation as it relates to other things that have been written down. Now, to have software that becomes more tuned, more accurate, increases its coverage, means that it has to learn from somebody or something. And that's where reinforcement learning and supervised learning and unsupervised learning come into play. So often for deep learning, it's unsupervised. Point your software towards a document repository, go figure things out. Supervised learning, here are the things that we already know. Hey, software, go down this path. Learn from what we've already shared with you. And then reinforcement learning is letting it do an unsupervised, sort of a deep learning process, but then telling the software whether it did a good job or a bad job. I know over the last 6 months, at least here in the US, tons of people have picked up their first pets ever, because of the sort of stay-at-home quarantine orders. So everyone's learning how to basically house-train puppies. Reinforcing software learning is the same thing as reinforcing behavior in a puppy. Good dog, bad dog, let it go and do the rest of the work.
And can be quite as messy too sometimes.
So we've both learned the hard way, absolutely. I think if we look at the broad universe of AI and then look at a somewhat smaller universe of machine learning, we can sort of visually say, okay, there's reinforcement learning, and then there's unsupervised and supervised learning. And then at its core is this consistency of deep learning. The more information you can feed an engine, especially because the engine is running around at CPU cycles, very fast, very, very deep, it comes back with better results. And what we're really looking for in real terms is just that. You want it to read a contract for the first time, understand what clauses are risky, understand what clauses are not, understand how far it sort of varies from your determined playbook or your preferential clause library, and then give you guidance as to how to react. Whether it's use this clause instead, or use this clause because this other clause is in here already, or whether it's simply, hey, this should go to an expert. Now, the reason that we focus on deep learning is when there is a large amount of data, deep learning versus older AI algorithms drives considerably higher performance in terms of accuracy and coverage. So for those of you who are looking at AI as an emerging technology today and are wondering, how do I find out what's best for me? Remember that you want to look at both the accuracy of the AI engine, but also the coverage. So how often is it right, and how many things does it understand? And this, I think, will help fit into your digital transformation landscape, sort of regardless of where you might be. If we look back 10 years, and these are our Google Trend or Google search request hits. So in 2010 of September, 10 years ago, machine learning had a relative token index of 8 and AI of 19. Comparing those to September of 2020, literally last week, machine learning has a weighting of 90, which is more than a 10-fold, and AI, or artificial intelligence, has a 5-fold increase. That sounds pretty impressive till we look at the improvement for deep learning, which 10 years ago was an index level of 1, and now is an index level of 31. Clearly, technologists are seeing value and are looking to understand more, not just in terms of AI, but the specific kinds of AI that can drive value for a practical applied business use. As we sort of take that next leap and run us through that digital transformation journey, let's go ahead and run a poll to understand where all of you as audience members and as collaborators and as partners in this journey together, where are you in your digital transformation journey? Are you at the manual stage, paper files, maybe outsourcing opportunities to someone else? Are you at the basic stage, document management system, maybe recently implemented a basic CMS or a basic CLM? Or have you started to develop your own AI engines? You have an AI team, Or are you transformative, which is that you are deploying domain-specific AI? So polls up on screen, select manual, basically just a hair over paper and pens. Basic, you've got a basic DMS. Intelligent, you're starting to play around with AI a little bit. Or transformative, you've got content or domain-specific AI.
So the results are still coming in, so we'll just give it another couple of seconds.
No, of course.
Okay, we'll close the poll now, and the results are on the screen.
Okay. So, Paul, since we've been doing this for a while, this may be the best number we've seen in terms of basic folks are in the 57 to 60% range.
Absolutely.
I remember, 3 or 4 years ago, I would have seen 80. Maybe last year was close to 70%. And we're seeing more folks in the intelligent level, which means for us, we're starting to see AI deployments. This is absolutely wonderful.
Yep, this is the best set of results we've seen to date, for sure.
I think it's certainly trending in the right direction.
Really interesting.
Now, I'm sure that means as we continue, we're going to get some more unusual questions coming up. So now people should not be limited in terms of their tech questions or asking about AI stuff in general. Maybe just sort of running a quick base here. For those folks who have said that they were at the basic level or they were at the, even at the transformative level, where you are in your process, I think, should also determine your technology, not your contract risk, just to be real clear. So there are a number of different technology stacks that some people might consider emerging, and some people may not. So things like optical character recognition, now being able to read and convert images to text, or leveraging a connector for your CRM to facilitate intake, or having connectors that allow Microsoft Word to use a clause or a template library and connect to a contract platform to minimize versionitis, right? Or make sure that you can always save in the cloud. These are things that as you advance your adoption of process, that you can also increase your adoption of emerging technologies. Really the adoption that we've seen, I think, is that organizations are looking for faster turn from their contract and legal teams. They're looking at self-service with ease of access, ease of use, and they're looking for it affordably. I'm not going to say inexpensively, but affordably. The days of 8-digit implementations are long gone, right? So being able to do this with the current capital budget, notwithstanding. And the reason they're looking to do this, in some ways, used to be to build a competitive advantage. And for continuous improvement, sort of good reasons to do things. I think, and really we probably should have, I should have updated this slide more recently. What I've seen is a renewed focus on cash liquidity, basically ensuring that revenue is going to be resilient in times of uncertainty, but also that your supply chain and supply chain costs are agile. So being able to get in front of things quickly and being able to determine where you can optimize your business relationships. And in many ways, this is not to freeze things. I think it's to strengthen relationships we all have with our customers, with our suppliers, with our trading partners. To be able to do that quickly is paramount. And technology allows us to do that if you deploy it correctly. Now, Paul, you've often said that there's a big difference in how you might treat supply chain agility versus revenue resilience. Can you help me out a little bit on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a couple of views from some of our more recent research at IACCM. If you take a look back at well, let's say prior practice, that double helix thing down the bottom. Previously, we would put in a huge amount of energy, not so much really understanding requirements or anything tedious like that, but we'd put a shed load of energy into the dance, the negotiation itself, and then the implementation would be left to itself. We just throw it over the wall. Now we all know how ridiculous that is, right? So much more now, as practitioners in commercial and contract management, we see the reverse actually operating. So before going to market, there's a material amount of energy that goes into identifying the strategic positioning, identifying the level of uncertainty that we have within delivery and deliverable, understanding the environment in which we work, and how all of these levers pull together to understand what we're actually trying to contract for. The actual negotiation by the application of principles and contracting standards is actually a relatively straightforward thing. But yes, there are a few items that need to be negotiated on a complex agreement. But more and more, we're seeing standard terms, standard, well-positioned provisions that don't favor one party or the other, that are fair and balanced, leading to much higher velocity in that deal negotiation phase. And then our research shows, and this echoes what I've experienced personally throughout my entire commercial career, the importance of applying effective post-award management around that implementation and operationalization of the contract. Without that, you end up with these fragmented activities, a lack of a holistic view, and clearly time spent in the wrong place. The wheel on the right shows how important and how integrated it is to bring a holistic view into the picture, so that you look at both pre and post award. You look at both buy and sell sides of the equation. It is a series of trading relationships that you need to optimize using the tools and techniques that are available, and technology plays a huge role in that. That's clearly based on the research that we've seen, and it's a three-legged stool. You need to improve the skills and capability of your process. You need to allow your people to have the skills and capabilities that they need to be successful within that process. And third, the system tools capability needs to support both of those first two things. That's what we've seen. Before we leave uncertainty, though, how this drives the contract domain in which you operate. We've seen, this is some more recent research that came out of our post-award activities, where, without going into too much detail, once you hear it, it's common sense, but getting there was quite a challenge, as many things are. So if there is uncertainty in delivery, or there's uncertainty in deliverable, then you need to have a different commercial relationship, commercial arrangement, than where there's no uncertainty in either delivery or deliverable. So example, where you have a very clear delivery and a very clear method of delivery of what you are delivering and how you're doing it, a traditional contract focused engagement is perfectly fine. However, the flip side of the coin, where you have a high degree of uncertainty about what you're doing, like you're not really quite sure on what the deliverable is at the end, or uncertainty about how you're going to get there in terms of the steps along the path, then let's face it, an agile contracting methodology is really the only thing that's going to get you there. Now, would you rather play in the traditional contract focused area, where our research says that in the next 5 years, 60% of the activity is going to get replaced by machine because it's handle turning repetitive stuff? Or would you rather be in the innovative, exciting, value-focused, adaptive area, which needs human innovation and drive and engagement to be successful? That's what really gets me excited about being a commercial and contract management professional in this particular piece of time, because of the move and the support that systems give to free up our energy in the contract focus world and enable us to focus our energy in that value focus adaptive environment.
Excellent. So
we have another poll though, and I'll be a bit quicker about clicking the launch button this time. So our question for you guys is, which contract domain do you operate in? Are you mainly buy side? Are you mainly sell side? Are you a bit of both? So this is multiple choice. So obviously, if you've got the buy and sell side predominance, and then the pre and post. Certainly in my career, I've worked on both buy and sell. So they are the same, the different sides of the same coin. Absolutely. Skills that you need to sit at one side of the table are very similar to those that you need at the other. And I think there's a growing awareness of the importance of post-contract management. There's a lot of energy around the pre-contract phase, particularly in world commerce and contracting too. But now we're seeing how important that post-contract environment is. Now, I think we've probably, yep, looks like we're going to close the poll now. So let's take a look at the results. Interesting, very interesting set of results. Certainly recognition about the importance of both pre and post contract engagement. What do you think about the buy-sell side split though, Art?
Well, I think this might be the first year that I've seen higher sell side than buy side.
Yeah.
Here at WCC, previously known as ICCM.
Right. It is. That is very interesting. It would be interesting to see if that's reflective of the summit as a whole.
Yes.
But certainly in our audience today, absolutely. Interesting.
Very interesting. I think as we head towards the ROI survey at the end, it'll be interesting to see how that flows through.
We'll see. We'll see how it locks in.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
So I can't remember whether this is you or me. We've done this so many times. Might be me. So
I'm either way, Art. You go.
Okay, fair enough. So what we are seeing, and I guess this is very much aligned with the polls that we've done already, is that there's a growing impact from automation in terms of commercial and contract processing. Analytics providing sufficient, or I like to think even better than just sufficient, insight into business performance and portfolio when it comes to either customer blend or supplier mix. And then moving as we look at the post-award importance, and this is something that to Paul's point earlier, we're seeing more and more importance on managing contracts after they're signed, that post-award. And it's not just about service agreements, whether they be service providers or professional services, but it's also for those contracts for direct materials or for just longer term. You negotiate like heck for 6 months, that's great, but this is a 5-year deal. Let's make sure that we're getting our value out of this for the next 60 months, not just shortening our initial negotiation process. And we're seeing that RPA on an intake, but also blockchain enabling the post-award compliance management by providing more strength in the digital transformation around payments, orders, and the like, and being able to tie that back to the original contract document. I think that over time, and I'll let Paul sort of dictate when the WCC thinks we're going to see this, that we'll see a much higher level of automation of post-award transaction true-ups as a result of good contract behavior, and not just something that we would see from a standard sort of e-com framework.
No, I think we're seeing that happening more and more now. That sort of post-contract verification, sort of true-up sort of activity. Yeah, that's happening. That's happening now.
But you're seeing successful. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's a question that's come in from Ollie, and it's it's a bridge into what we were talking about before as much.
Yeah.
But the question he raises, how big is the risk of lock-in on tech that may be obsolete in 1 or 2 years' time? Many of us face a big challenge in getting exec management attention on contract lifecycle management investments, and it would hideously backfire if the tech is developing so rapidly that the target has moved hugely in the couple of years, and we ended up buying the wrong thing. Thoughts?
Well, a little bit of a use case story. And I'm going to personalize this a little bit from an Altria perspective, which I guess is hard for me not to do. We took almost 95% of our customers, and it's going to sound like one of those CPG or fast-moving consumer group adverts, but it's really not. We replaced, or not really replaced. Yeah, we did. We replaced some of the core technology underneath our tool with an AI engine that would effectively drive higher results for things like interpreting contracts. And we did it without letting people know. And what we did was measured how often they were correcting the software's suggestions to determine whether or not the software is performing accurately. In other words, very real world. The important part for me was this was technology that arguably was very complex, but the use of the technology by the end user, the business user, was nothing more than saying, yeah, that's the right answer. Simplifying the user interface, isolating the user experience from the technology, in many ways is a way to future-proof your use of a CLM. The other is maybe not looking at it as a monolithic CLM, but looking at it as contract analytics, looking at it as workflow and approval, looking at it as almost microservices that can be successfully and succinctly deployed, and to do it in a very holistic way so that you can manage your change. You can minimize some of that flashpoint of a big bang swap, and there are some thoughts on that later in this session, or certainly on day 2. But this makes it very, very amenable. Whether you're putting out for 50 or 100, or putting out for 15,000 or 50,000, it's much easier now than it ever has been to successfully deploy in a very short period of time, and really sort of minimize the impact of any kind of future-proof risk that you need to avoid.
Totally. The other point I might make, Art, is that the barriers to entry for moving into a CLM solution, particularly with the advent of cloud-based architectures, much lower. So you can work with a quality vendor, but you can put a toe in the water without making a material, bet the farm sort of engagement. But Ricardo makes a really interesting point. He said, I've seen too many failed implementations because developers automated current processes instead of basically putting in the energy into that process re-engineering to deliver something that was fit for purpose.
Very true. And I don't know about you, Paul, but I'd say, check your vendors, check your partners, find out what other people are doing so that you can get your arms around that process change.
All right. And World Commerce and Contracting, we have our a preferred standard CLM process that we're working now with many vendors, including Altria, to embrace that standard process so that we don't have to go through this relearning every time that we engage with a new vendor. So that's important. Very, really good point.
And it's one of the real value add. I think there are many value adds, of course, that the World Commerce and Contracting Organization brings, but that peer network of best practice is certainly key.
Totally.
So we talked a little bit about buy, sell, pre, post. What do you see across different industries?
Yeah, this chart is, we could spend a whole hour just talking about this chart, but really interesting to see the key takeaway, and you see huge differences between industries, which again we could delve into. But I draw what drives me crazy with this chart every time I look at it. It's about halfway down. You see the repository of signed contracts.
Yes.
Across the board. A large chunk of the respondents to this survey acknowledged that really it was as a place to bung your contracts. That's really what the CLM tool is being used for. And the real benefits of portfolio or individual analytics or portfolio analytics, better still, those last two in the bottom there, still very little penetration across many industries.
I guess they're taking a very data-centric approach. So ensure that you've got a repository, maybe some reporting and dashboards, and then some spots where we see document generation, as well as managing of the approval workflow.
Yeah, it's now this was a year or so ago, memory serves. Into the Future report, that's where this data was collated from. And I think we're seeing movements in, as you saw on the poll just now, I think we're seeing improvements in this area, but there's so much more to do. Right, cool.
No, very cool. So we've got a bunch of new technologies. We see that we've got varying levels of experience and success criteria across different domains, and buy side versus sell, and industry, and pre and post award. Are we really equipped for some of these emerging technologies? So maybe starting off with a view over our shoulder, so to speak, or the rear view mirror, looking at what was hot last year in terms of what was available, metadata, analytics, extraction, more metadata, mobile apps, RPA. Things that are right around the corner: natural language processing, interpretation by AI, better obligation extraction. We thought those were literally just months away. Things are a little farther out: integration of blockchain, which we certainly see advanced, complex self-service, and then seamless interoperability, to your point earlier, Paul, publishing open APIs to facilitate that, something that I think we've seen accelerated. Looking at it now, in 2020, we've seen obligation extraction being available and now, blockchain advancing to, I think, right before broad adoption. Third-party clause match to determine sort of the match of external paper to your playbook is now available and sort of off the shelf. And we've seen sort of this rather positive movement. Now, from a risk and reward perspective, Ricardo's comment notwithstanding that sometimes we still have to remember to re-engineer our processes, we see that there's a lot of good emerging technology being deployed today that has very low risk and I think pretty high reward, which we'll get to in another slide. And even the things that are at high risk, just to be very clear, the risk is really one of overblown expectations. So when the project team says, hey, we have natural language processing for input, so you can call up a phone number and ask to have a contract generated, that's not exactly where the industry is going to be in another 6 months.
It's interesting though, isn't it, that eventually, like the hype around AI of a couple of years ago, the hype around blockchain as being the panacea for everything, that has been that's starting to evaporate, but real quality use cases are now coming out, which demonstrate the strength of the technology and what it can do.
Well, I fully think that in another year or two, these are going to be solid on the available, and they will simply be low risk, high reward. What's interesting, Paul, and this is probably a great use case for another research report, is what's coming down the pike in that arriving at horizon sort of stage that we haven't started to even ideate yet. We hear about some of these great young talent in the innovation workshop earlier today, and how they've sort of brought all of these wonderful things together for 2025. It'll be an interesting world coming up, I think.
Sure.
So we certainly see a level of pure reward coming out of obligation extraction to the point of being able to manage the post-award environment just a little bit more. RPA portals for intake, streamline, making things easier to use, all very high value, and I think, as we saw before, very low risk.
Do you really think though, Art, that we've got into a position where we do really have deep learning unsupervised, or is it still really smart but pattern matching on a wide scale?
What we're seeing, and this is, I'll say it in a very practical use, this is not, the AI coming out of a university or some Carnegie thing, or Stanford. This is in terms of things that are being delivered today to corporate America and corporate, say Europe as well. The ability to have software go through a contract repository and identify areas of risk and then present those areas of risk to a user, and that user to be able to flag, yeah, you got it, or no, you missed it. And sorry for the rather flip discussion there. But it is that straightforward and is being delivered today. So it's unsupervised deep learning. But the engine tuning is now being done through reinforcement. So you still need, I think, human expertise to find the wheat for the chaff and to ensure that the engine learns correctly.
So it's still human-led, machine-supported, rather than the other way around.
I'm not sure that I would fully agree with human-led. I think, not that we're letting the AI engines, they're not raised by wolves, but we're sending them out into the forest and saying, go figure out what kind of trees are there and take a look at some leaves and come back. So we're letting it do some of the basic inference to understand the relationship between certain clauses and to read through content and determine what the author may have meant, and then present its findings to a human. And then the human is saying good or bad. So is that still human-led because we're making the decision of right and wrong? Or is that human-supported because we're providing feedback to the machine?
Interesting distinction. Be interested to hear what the guys on the call think, and the chat's open to enable you to do that.
Well, that might have to be another poll, but but to me, how it's working is what I'm seeing. How we would define it, it gets interesting. It's a good test of semantics.
Good point. Good point. Interesting.
So we actually have some screenshots of deep learning with positive and negative reinforcement coming up in the next section for technology in action. So we've got 4 use cases. And I think some of these may also interact with the software tool and the quick demos that are set up here at the Vibe Summit. So I will remind everyone to go back and take a look at those as well. But let's just sort of step through these. These shouldn't take long, and please, to Paul's earlier comment, we welcome questions as we go. So maybe just some quick visuals on robotic process automation for contract intake. So, there are some gotchas. So I always like to sort of give some heads up, because this is something we talked about as being very high reward, very low risk. But you will want to make sure that you get your corporate IT guys involved. This is something you may want to push out to a whole bunch of users. It rolls out well. You can pilot and then go big. But you want to make sure that you control the story, because once this is out, people will expect that they will see every kind of contract, internal, external, anything, policy, procedure, all of that is going to be out of the portal. So manage that expectation. And then, pilot with friends and pilot with critics, something that I recommend regardless of how you roll out or which technologies you roll out. For every critic you can convert, you will learn more. To Ricardo's question earlier about process rollout, it's a great way to challenge your current as is. If I look at some numbers, both from Gartner and I think also the World Commerce and Contracting Organization themselves, show that contract automation, contract intake, clearly 4 out of 5 folks are looking to do this. And yet to the same, 4 out of 5 said from Gartner that they were not using a good way to bring contracts in. So their intake process was somewhat challenged. Now, some of the benefits of RPA, this is just that, robotic process automation. So we're talking about making the intake process easier, shortening cycles, digitization of incoming documents if it's third-party paper, providing very easy searching because you're sort of indexing data on the fly, and you are, I think, mitigating potential risks by pulling out relevant terms. This could be through an intranet portal, something, sort of inside, it'll look like it's inside of your firewall. Give a very simple, easy to use flow. Could be tied to your CRM, Salesforce or Dynamics. Can be connected to your Microsoft Outlook environment for those folks who use Outlook for mail and who does not. Likewise, moving beyond that, using artificial intelligence to extract metadata. This is to extract and to normalize data from third-party contracts, being able to run the OCR process and convert images or PDFs to searchable text, and then pulling content out directly from the stream. This also gives you the ability to feed contract analytics or other platforms in case you have not quite fully executed on the CLM. Just as put a pin in this kind of topic, this is also a great way to do initial triage determination, so you know how many of your existing contracts you need to move into a new contract repository. Now, the use case for machine learning, and in this case, machine learning around matching clauses and doing comparison for third-party paper, which, just to sort of maybe put a qualifier out there, at Ultra, we often think about third-party paper as a challenge that needs to be addressed, but the same technology works with your own paper, checking for modifications that might have been made offline, and then catching them before they're loaded into the platform for approval and workflow. What this does is quite simply identify clauses in a contract, map those to your clause library, and then to understand whether you've missed clauses, so sort of doing a template comparison, but also identifying whether the clause variances are acceptable or not. This can also trigger things like automatic amendment generation. So if there was a GDPR 3 that came out and you needed to update your docs, that's a great use case. Or all of a sudden you're doing business in California and you need to worry about the CCPA. Being able to do clause analytics provides that level of risk protection or identification to really enable a streamlined process, whether it's one-off or in bulk. Now, from a practical use case perspective, this is simply a matter of taking your paper, comparing it against the template, identifying which clauses are the same or different and to what extent. We see the clause match on the bottom, make edit changes, hit reanalyze, get the new answers. Being able to quickly identify missing clauses from your predetermined templates, those standard templates, and then finding missing clauses, or actually identifying that clauses are missing, simply select them, then click on the blue add button and insert them into the contract. Now, we talked a little bit about deep learning and being able to leverage the idea of reinforced learning. We see some great use case for reinforcement learning around risk factors and risk identification. I can't emphasize enough, and Paul, I'll certainly take your input or ask for it, the use of professionals as citizen scientists versus data scientists in a machine learning, reinforced learning framework seems to be the right way for the industry as a whole to go. Would you agree, or what are your thoughts?
Totally agree. I mean, to assume that a commercial and contract professional can also become a highly educated data scientist is just balmy. To be successful in the application of AI tools, even just a couple of years ago, you needed to understand the basics of recall, the basics of precision, some statistical analysis, how these things fit together. That's not skills and capabilities that you would expect to have from contract and commercial management professionals. So the only way that this technology and application is going to advance is if you say you can make that interpretation and analysis something that can be readily achieved by a practitioner rather than a data scientist. Totally
That's
agree.
very true. Very true. I wouldn't want to bring a data scientist to a negotiation table either. So I'm sure there's a good quid pro quo there.
Exactly.
There's also a place where we found that deep learning was a great way to get started. Using an existing combination of contract libraries or repositories and sort of letting the engine start, and then being able to refine through this level of reinforcement enabled faster time to precision, as well as going beyond recall into coverage for unseen. The environment that I'm demonstrating here, of course, is all to his own. But if I just sort of walk through this particular slide set for any given agreement, being able to find individual risk factors and then being able to take those risk factors across a larger contract or document pool seems like a nice dashboard. It's a good thing to do. Where the reinforcement comes in is for any of these given clauses or paragraph stubs or series of words that indicated a positive risk, to be able to simply agree with or disagree with the engine and not provide any content. What we have found is if we ask for people to comment, we either get nothing or way too much, and we'd rather just in aggregate say, was it right or was it wrong? And if it was right, great. If it was wrong, okay. Send that back to the engine will learn from it, as you would with, I'll say training a pet, not that it's quite that simple. But for the end user, it is that simple. Good boy, bad boy, continue to move forward. This enables the tagging and the change on any given percentage so that the risk factor for a given customer or a given domain or a given Friday, right, can be set and adjusted just with our citizen scientists, just with contract professionals, subject matter experts. And that really has been a great way to move the ball forward. Now, I think we only have another 5 or 6 minutes. Certainly, this is a great time to queue up questions, but I'm also going to copy a piece of text, hopefully to the entire chat. And Paul, you'll tell me whether I got it right. Or whether there we go. Yep. Perfect. I just blasted a link. So we invite everyone to go ahead and follow the link that I just sent out on chat, and it's going to take you into a contract lifecycle management for emerging technologies calculator. So what we're actually going to do is we've simplified it a bit. I think we have 12 questions, and they're going to include things such as the number of employees, the number of contracts, number of legal, non-legal. So basically a high level information that we're going to aggregate, and we will combine with the other region, and we will show on day 2. There's also an option, if you're interested, I think if you say yes to question 12, we will also send you a personalized one-off ROI calculation.
Very good. Thank you, Art. Really insightful walk through the emerging tech, and it is really interesting, how even since the last time we delivered this session, some of the things that were on the horizon have now moved very solidly into the here and now.
Yes.
So yeah, absolutely, and the application of natural language and machine learning really is a discipline that's well developed now. I mean, going back in my professional career, we used an AI platform as part of our GDPR triage.
Yes.
And we did things with that platform that would have been unable to do, with a whole army of folks. So the technology certainly has application. Interesting question or statement from Justin, really. Is there a real risk for onshore employment levels? Going by the 80-20 rule, the AI tool identifies 80% of humans do the 20%, those humans could we be anywhere on the globe? My response to that, Justin, is it doesn't take technology to highlight that. That's obvious. Simply, you know, an analysis of work throughput will demonstrate that. And going back to what we said before, our research shows that in that area where it's focused on traditional contracting, where we're applying standards, we're applying principles, technology is replacing everything that a human is doing to the benefit of the human beings, to the benefit of mankind, I believe, in that segment. Gives us then the opportunity to focus our professional energy on things that are much more exciting and much more require a greater sense of innovation and job satisfaction. So it's not some, I don't think it's something to be take away as being a negative thing. I think it is a very positive thing. Geo asks, how long is the implementation of a proper artificial intelligence solution? Certainly my experience was it took us nearly 4 years of hard graft to get our AI solution implemented in a previous life. Now it can be done in a matter of weeks. Of that, I am sure.
I would certainly echo that, because we generally have the AI engine updating behind the scenes as we go, fresh deployment of the AI engine within the CLM is about 2 weeks.
Right, and out of the box,
50,000, sorry, yeah.
You know, and out of the box, Altria is just, there are a number of other vendors who have out of the box capability. And, you know, there's some tweaking to do, but now the recall and precision that's derived out of the box is so much higher than it was when I started implementing AI solutions.
When you started implementing solutions, Paul, what were the typical sort of accuracy and precision and recall numbers? Do you recall?
If you've got, if first time of running an out-of-the-box model, if you got more than 20% in either of those, you were doing well.
Yeah, just as a comparison point, because I think we're one of the few that will own up to it, is we're floating around 87% out of the box.
Yeah, anything north of 70% for recall and precision is useful. And obviously, the higher you get to Unity, the better. So we are running out of time. I do encourage. There's still folks coming into the meeting, which I find quite surprising. that we are going to have a follow-on session, Art and I, on Wednesday. So if you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please join us for our follow-up session. And we have a session that's specifically aimed at our Asia Pac and India and Asia Pac crew later on today, stroke early morning our time. So it has been a pleasure, Art. Thank you so much for the expertise that you bring to these sessions, and I look forward to continuing to work with you for the other 3 slots that we have.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, and your firsthand insight into emerging technologies, specifically AI, is always a welcome addition to any afternoon for me.
It's fun, Art. Thank you so much. And guys, enjoy the rest of your day. And there's 15 more minutes of the summit, so now please do take advantage of the time that you have. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.